Please help me welcome to the front Director Emily Packer. We'd also like to invite up Josh Margolis, Dragonfly, and Moody Harney. Wow, I really, it's just so great to see it on the big screen. It really is. I saw it on my laptop and fell in love with it, but it's really beautiful. I didn't notice on my laptop the soundscape. The sound design was really magnificent. And I guess that's as good a place to start as any. But yeah, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I have made a number of small short films, and the sound is terrible. So I really wanted, I think that in general with this film, I wanted it to feel like a movie and not just like a documentary. And part of that for me was in creating like really rich visuals with DP John Marty and additional camera Ben and Leslie. The other part of that is the sound design. And so we actually worked with a sound designer based in Canada named Kaya Sarala to sort of make it like feel sort of seamless between the very different things that we visit. We also, we worked very intentionally with the score, and we even had some like hydrophone recordings that someone gave us to play with. So I spoke with Kaya, the sound designer, very early in the process, and I just told her everything nerdy that I could think of about oysters to see if she might incorporate those into how she was working with those materials.
And how did you come to this, the idea of climate change and New York City history and all that wrapped around the oyster?
Well, I met several of my collaborators doing a fellowship at Union Docks where we were prompted to think about transit because the L train was shutting down. And so, of course, several of us were also thinking about how Sandy was the reason why the L train was shutting down. And, we engage with the subways every day, but what, we know what happens when there's suddenly water in there. So I was thinking about what resources we as a city were willing to literally like put underground in order to like sustain ourselves for the future, and how far out is that imagination of the future? Is it 80 years, which is when the current L train infrastructure will corrode, or like is it 80? Yeah, not 8, but 80. How do we envision the future standing in the shoes of the present? And so when I heard about the oysters as like also this resource that was being very intentionally planted and put into the underground, I wanted to sort of know what it was like to be optimistic about the future in that way when I often feel very pessimistic about it.
It was nice, the optimism, the reality of what we're facing, but, some lightheartedness and some a lot of beauty. Thank you for that. Josh, can you talk about how you came to be involved with the project?
Yeah, so I was not one of the Union Doc fellows that Emily met. We met working in commercial documentary on a very traditionally produced Netflix series, and we both kind of were craving something more gratifying than that in its own ways. That's great. I think we still both, to a great degree, do that for our 9 to 5. And while we're talking about the people that worked on this, can we just have everyone that was on the cast and crew stand up in the audience real quick? Because so this team was brought together in January of 2020, right before the pandemic. We had one in-person meeting, and then it was Mondays for the past 4 years over Zoom. And we were very lucky to have this group of people, and it expanded every year that we were on this project. We did casting, we met Moody, we met all of these, there's so many other characters that we had in the film in the audience, and it was much in the way that oysters exist as this communal force. We were trying to build that with our film, make it collective, and that, I think, really isn't a tribute to the way we produced it, is as much of an experiment as the hybridity of it.
And how did you come to be involved?
I'm the oyster man.
Clearly.
Yeah. No, I mean, so, New York City is oysters in the base of it. People think about New York City as being like this big city, but they don't actually think about it being a waterfront city, a place that has nothing but pathways of water around us, and that's actually the thing that developed us from the gateway. And, me being black, I have a lot of ties to what is the black history of this. What is the history in terms of the planet? What's the history in terms of what's going on for our future? And that's really how I got into oysters in the first place, and that's the reason why I think I can give something to this film. This film is about something that would normally be not watchable, but they did something extremely watchable out of, right? And it's about all those different parts, all the different elements, little key pieces that are missing, but also involving everybody. And that's what ties me into oysters, ties them into oysters, ties all of us into this documentary. I think that's how I got into it, yeah.
And when will we be able to eat oysters from the coast?
Never. So oysters are from New York City Harbor are not supposed to be for consumption. They're supposed to be there for the allocation of the animals. We used to have whaling and oystering as the top industries here inside of New York City. So whaling was a thing because basically we used whale blubber for oil. That's how you lit up a town. So if you were a governor or you were somebody in terms of township that was important, you needed whale blubber so that you could actually take the whale blubber to your district and be able to light up the city. Okay, and so now we don't use whale blubber anymore. We use other resources, but we had those things coming through here. And the reason for it was because the ocean was littered with oyster reefs before 1860s. 1860s, we came through with steamboats and just tore up the infrastructure of everything. And the oyster is the thing that we need to put back. It's like 10,000 years, like I was saying, maybe earlier than that, 20,000 years. Our oldest actual artifacts come from the oyster reef. They come from the oyster midden, And so back in those time periods, people actually respected the shell, and they would use it as currency. They would use it as a place to be able to, look back to the future. They would come with mountains of oyster shells to their chieftain and be like, look, this is my contribution, and this was something that was valuable at that time period. Now it's the same thing that we're in the time space of. We have to look forward to going to go terraform Mars and, Elon Musk and all of that,
It's your next movie, Emily. Yeah. And Dragonfly, talk about your how you came to work with these lovely people.
I believe our connection was Annie Sprinkle, and I have the good fortune of being incredibly good friends with Annie Sprinkle. She's beyond ally. She's an accomplice. And she's really supported me in my artistry. And so when they approached Annie about playing Aphrodite in the film, she actually suggested me. And it was just really kismet, because it was art, making art that helped me get through the pandemic. And this was one of a few projects that I was kind of giddily triangulating between to just keep my sanity and keep my joy. This is my first time seeing it. I just flew up from Texas to be here. And so my mind is just really blown by how gorgeously cinematic this is, how meditative this is, and has me even further rethinking my relationship with oysters. Because as the embodiment of Aphrodite, y'all, if my friend took me to the spa, got my hair did, I'm just, method acting to be here. and then associated with vanity, with sensuality, but also like they look like rocks, but they're sentient beings that prefer community. Like, I'm really sitting with that in a way that I didn't have that information before making the film. And so I'm literally sitting here thinking, like, are oysters mean to each other? Are there, like, clusters of genocidal oysters trying to take over another reef somewhere? Like, serious questions. Like, what else can we learn from these oysters? And the way that I really enjoy telling people, I'm in this film, and it celebrates the queerness of oysters. Now say that in Texas and not get, like, put away into a sanctuary somewhere. But I'm proud to be a part of this conversation, this just beautifully luscious conversation. And what can we learn from the oysters? In the same way that I thank the trees, I'm going to be thanking the oysters.
So, who is behind the whole oyster restoration, all these efforts?
Well, there's a few organizations that are spearheading this. The one that we hear from two directly, one of which is Scape, Landscape Architecture, which is they are building those. We saw sort of offshore the breakwaters, and those breakwaters incorporate underwater structures, and they're also designing the architecture for fish, for aquatic life, as much as they are for human use of those beaches and things like that. I believe that Scape, they termed oyster texture was them. And so they're a big player in the industry. And then Billion Oyster Project, of course, is their goal is to replant 1 billion oysters back into the New York harbor. And what?
Pete Malinowski.
Yes, directed by Pete Malinowski. But while we're shouting out, I have a couple of Billion Oyster folks here right now, if you want to just say hello. Yeah? So that's Agata from the film and Helene, who helped us get access to Billion Oyster Project, who, also interfaced with Prince William to get him access to. So if you want to talk about the Prince, just kidding. If you want to talk about Billion Oyster Project, you can speak to them about that. But they're doing incredible work. There's a whole, we didn't capture it in the film, but there is a whole high school on Governor's Island where children are, learning the harbor school. Yeah, it's an education and sort of like a maritime education. You get both your English studies, but you also are a part of the project, replanting things, learning while you're doing. And a lot of people that come out of that program also have continued education and careers in the field, which is really cool for a public New York school. Really incredible.
Thanks. I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions. Yeah.
So, Dragonfly actually started to answer this question, but it's to the group in general. As I was watching the film, I was just really taken in by how it wasn't just art. When the artist appeared, it was actually historical narrative. And how much, after watching the film, do your words and your acting mean something else? And then for those who are on the science side, how much impact did the art have on you in experiencing it?
Well, to follow up on how I'm connected to Annie Sprinkle, Annie and her partner Beth Stevens have a concept that's a movement called ecosexuality, which is the exploration of how our sensual and sexual selves intersect with the environment and the ecology. So for me, this has definitely been a continuation of that kind of work. And it changes the metaphor from Earth as mother to Earth as lover. Because let's be honest, we all kind of take our mothers for granted. And we take and we take and we take. But with a lover, it should be a much more symbiotic relationship, give and take. So on one hand, yeah, we joke about hugging trees, but seriously, when is the last time you've hugged a tree? When's the last time that you've eaten something that is actual animal flesh and thought about that animal and said thank you? Or how many of us actually even go and harvest our own food? And not to mention the fact that, well, you know what, if trees are sentient beings, so was that broccoli you were probably eating, you know? So it's just like really taking a moment. I mean, I'm sorry, broccoli, but you're tasty, even without the cheese. So it's like, you know, just reframing it. I feel like we just need to break the paradigm of everything that we think that we know about Earth and stop being such specious and thinking that we're superior to everything that exists, and let them be our teachers. That's my answer.
And to build off of that, one of the biggest experiments with the film was the hybridity. And with a lot of what we're doing is we're blurring boundaries. And one side of the film with the narrative stuff that was written with the characters playing off of what we captured in the documentary, they are trying to fit it into the system of what the film industry is. We're not like easily programmable. Thanks for having us in the festival. But it's like trying to make the point that the differences between the two are really minute, and it creates a lot of solidarity between different social issues, the environmental issues. We're all in this together, and additionally, it helps make both points stronger by being able to be poetic about something as well as scientific.
I'll be quick, but I think, you know, a lot of our creative choices were really made through research, through like a very intense and intentional period of research where we were interested in these themes about labor, themes about, you know, like the makeup of the city, race, like how, not just environmentalism and ecosexuality, but also sort of how the oyster can be prismatic and touches all of these things. And so our creative choices that have that poetic element are really based in what we learned and hope to sort of like reflect back onto it. And we'll sort of see, you know, since this is the world premiere, we'll sort of see how the film can be used towards advocacy, if that. But the film itself, I don't think of as an advocacy piece, but there's a possibility that, you know, like scientists, as you're asking about, like might see it and be able to use it to communicate differently than they would be able to normally.
Any other questions for these fine folks?
Going off of your research comment, I'm wondering what the process of editing this film was like and how you found such a unique voice. And like, did you start in the narrative side? Did you start in the documentary side? Like, what was like your first inkling into this like marriage of two different styles?
Can you guys hear that in the back?
Oh, great. Well, I edit also. I did not edit this film. Lindsay and Ben edited this film. Amazingly. But I definitely have that question on my mind often when I watch a film like this. And I think we started from, you know, coming down to like each scene in itself. Like, what do we want to know? What's important to know? What is important to know in terms of the feeling, in terms of the information, and in terms of like the characters? And then sort of like noticing where we could use what scene to say which thing, and how often we're repeating those, or where they sort of fit within each other. And then we started with like much fatter scenes that could go a couple different directions, and started laying them on top of each other and around each other to see how we could make more meaning by putting things together, or how certain visuals might flow. So if you want, Shai, we can show you several flow charts that we made that all represent, yeah. It was, I think this was cut 33 of all of it together. So we went through a lot of iterations of what it might look like once it, you know, each, not even just the scenes, but once it was all put together.
We are about to wrap up, so I just wanted to ask if you have anything else you want to share with the audience.
All right, so eat your oysters. Yeah, go eat some oysters. I'm at Pier 57. You know, it's on 16th Street and 11th Avenue. You can pull up on me any day. I got you. All right, that's it. That's all I'm saying.
I felt like I was an oyster. I felt like we were throttled back into oyster time, which is also, I think, not that different. I love trees, tree time. It was languid, and the languid pace. So thank you for that journey.
I guess
Thank you very much. It's playing tomorrow.
it's playing tomorrow. I guess the other thing that I'll say is just please tell people about it, because we are like a small, essentially unfunded team of friends that made this happen out of just the desire to make it. So we need help getting the word out about it, and we need you to tell your programmer friends, tell your distributor friends, post about it, all of that. Please help us out.
Thank you so much.